This week on Perspective, a historic step, a bold promise of peace. Since the Korean War, never has a North Korean leader set foot in the South. These were symbolic steps, to be sure, but as the leaders of the two Koreas joined hands, they signaled that this inter-Korean summit might be different. It was a carefully choreographed day of ceremony and surprise. Their bold joint declaration, a pledge to remove all nuclear weapons from the Korean peninsula, and within a year begin talks with the United States to officially bring an end to the Korean War, a promise of peace. Gone was the belligerent swagger of Kim Jong-un, who fires missiles, conducts nuclear tests, and taunts his enemies. Kim was smiling, seemingly relaxed, and told South Korean President Moon Jae-in he came to put an end to a history of confrontation. It was a historic meeting from the outset, and in the end, one that seemed to exceed expectations. President Trump proclaiming on Twitter, "Korean War to end," and then later sounding a note of caution, tweeting, "Good things are happening, but only time will tell." He later spoke about it from the Oval Office.
Like this. It's never gone this far. I don't think it's ever had this enthusiasm for them wanting to make a deal. And yeah, I agree. The United States has been played beautifully like a fiddle. Because you had a different kind of a leader. We're not going to be played, okay? We're going to hopefully make a deal. If we don't, that's fine. The United States in the past was played like a fiddle. Money going in, and nobody knew what was happening. The day after an arrangement was made, if you call it a deal, I doubt it, but an arrangement was made. They start with the nuclear weapons again. That's not happening to us.
The sweeping statements in the summit declaration leave many unanswered questions about how denuclearization might proceed, for example, what the first steps toward peace might actually be. To what extent will the North Korean dictator live up to his word? And what does all this mean for the much-hyped meeting between Kim and President Trump, expected in the next few weeks? On the program today, we'll assess the significance of this historic summit, and we begin with journalist Josh Smith, a senior correspondent for Reuters. He spoke to us from the media center just as the summit was ending. First of all, the images of this meeting are quite remarkable. How would you describe the atmosphere?
There has been quite a sense of history, a little bit of electricity in the air. Obviously, a lot of South Koreans are going about their daily lives, but many did tune in to see exactly what happened today. And for example, when Kim Jong-un crossed the border itself, shook hands with President Moon Jae-in of South Korea, many of the South Koreans who were around me audibly gasped and cheered. So it is something that they were very hopeful about, especially after all the tensions of last year.
There's also been a fair bit of skepticism heading into today as well, which is understandable. Do you think this meeting will change that?
Well, I think that it's a meeting that almost brings as many questions as answers. Korean officials were careful to say that they saw this as the beginning of a process, not an end in itself. And that's certainly, I think, what we're going to see here. The declaration that the two leaders put out, for example, is quite big on goals, especially when it comes to the nuclear program, has been criticized in the past. So it still remains a very much an open question whether this will resolve some of the problems here.
You've written about the problems of denuclearization and verification, in fact. What kind of next steps in that regard should we be watching for?
Well, especially heading up to this proposed summit between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, the Americans especially will be looking for some kind of concrete steps. This potentially could include some kind of inspections, possibly even shows that Kim Jong-un is actually dismantling or destroying various weapon systems. This is not something that we've seen so far. I've gone so far as to say that he would end his weapons tests and close his main nuclear weapons testing ground. And so those are some concrete steps that have still, of course, not been verified, and there's been some skepticism.
I want to ask you, too, a little bit about Kim himself. I realize this was a bit of political theater today, but he has been a bit of a mystery. What, if anything, did we learn about him?
Well, he did certainly come across as quite at ease. He was showed some charisma, even improvising the moment when he first shook hands with Moon and invited him to step across line into North Korea briefly, and then they crossed back into South Korea holding hands. From some of the journalists I've talked to and other observers who were at the event itself, they said that while keeping in mind, obviously, Kim Jong-un's record of what he's and the way he allegedly rules North Korea, they were quite struck by how charismatic and at ease he appeared in these meetings.
Why do you think this is happening now?
Well, that is the big question. Everyone is trying to divine exactly what Kim Jong-un's intentions are. Obviously, Donald Trump has said that it's because of his campaign of, quote, maximum pressure and sanctions that have brought Kim Jong-un to the table. A lot of North Korea watchers I've talked to, however, have been predicting this kind of pivot for some time. They've said that Kim is primarily concerned about securing his regime's survival, and that he's long wanted to pivot from this very expensive and invitational issue of nuclear weapons to build up the economy and potentially gain more international legitimacy.
Josh, thanks very much for talking to this and for your reporting on this.
Thank you.